Welcome to In the Green Chair, an interview podcast series for people looking to begin or expand their career in the green economy. I'm your host, Anna Garza, and today's guest in the Green Chair is former alpine ski racer and current research coordinator for POW, Protect Our Winters Canada, Natalie Knowles.
Sports really sets you up to be successful at pretty much anything you want to do. You've got a lot of drive and discipline, and that can be harnessed in any direction you want to take it. Any passion or interest you have can have a green or sustainable element to it.
Nat is also a current PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo. On this episode, we talk about ecotourism and the intersections between outdoor recreation and sustainability. Welcome to the Green Chair, Nat. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So, Nat, after being cooped up on and off for a while, these past 2 years have shown us just how important it is to get out, explore, and enjoy time outdoors. To find ways to be a tourist in your own backyard, you can say. And you've mentioned that also tourism is an important part of our society. It wasn't until the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro where the term sustainable tourism began to gain traction. Can you tell us what sustainable tourism is?
Yeah, so sustainable tourism is a number of different things. It's from the sustainability of the tourism operation itself. So having green buildings, green transportation systems, tourism stakeholders themselves being taking actions within their own day-to-day lives, as well as it's using tourism as a tool to either fund or promote or provide education for the natural environment, climate change, and other environmental issues and challenges that are happening. And it also connects people across the world on these issues because tourists are traveling from different locations and seeing the nature of other places and other countries and seeing how different cultures are responding to these changes as well. So it's a uniting force in sharing knowledge and sharing understanding of the world around us.
What does your research work look like at POW and at the University of Waterloo? What sort of research topics are you interested in?
We do a fair amount of climate modeling, so looking at what the future of climate change is going to be like. But then my interest is taking those models and looking at how can we manage that. So how can we either mitigate the situation or adapt to it, especially in the context of tourism-based communities. So towns and cities that are dependent on outdoor recreation or tourism, and basically helping the planning of those either operations or the communities themselves. So the human factors that play into climate change. We know a lot of scenarios about what might be coming our way, but how do we engage people? How do we prepare and plan for that, or make changes and become more sustainable proactively?
Tourism and climate change look so differently depending on where you are in the world. Are there certain templates or key ideas that apply to all ecotourism, or is it really just a place-by-place approach?
That's definitely one of the tricky things. I think it's very contextual. So there's some blanket assumptions that can be made. There's some, reviews that can be done that kind of cover everything. But really, when we're looking at how to deal with climate change, it's on a place-by-place basis, because even the differences in political views across our provinces changes how and what policies can be implemented and what the results are going to be of them. So, or on a municipal level for that matter. So it's pretty tricky. But that's honestly some of the more interesting parts of the research is how do we communicate this climate change data in the different contexts? How do we communicate this climate change data to our different members at POW? It's always it's a challenge, but it's a good challenge of figuring out how to speak to people and how to make change happen.
And Nat, I'm curious, what was that defining moment in your life that made you want to pursue your career and why sustainable tourism?
Yeah, so I have always had an interest in nature and love the outdoors and spend as much of my time as possible outdoors. And I grew up ski racing and traveling the world skiing. So it was during this traveling the world and skiing in different places where I realized that this is something I have so much experience in, and it's also a community that I can really speak to authentically and connect with on a personal level. The ability to do school and continue athletics got me super motivated in school itself, and seeing these connections between what I was doing in my sport and these changes I was seeing, and then what I was reading about in class and studying, and these climate and geographical or geography, and it really just linked up both of them. And then even to this day, I love the mix of doing field work where I'm in the forest or on the mountain measuring and doing stuff and getting to have a pretty great adventure, and then coupling that with writing reports and seeing the data and coming to these results and conclusions, and then going back and applying them in the field. So kind of that jumping back and forth between being outdoors and experiencing it and having an adventure and doing these pursuits, but then bringing it back, and how can that be used to make change that will then go back and help the activity that I love doing. So always jumping between the two of them. And I don't think I could do data crunching full time. I would go insane. I often don't like the days I'm stuck on my computer, but they're totally worth it because then I'm able to go out and do the things I love to do. And yeah, the mix between the two.
It's cool. Yeah, you found a career that has a mix of everything, kind of. You
Yeah,
get to
totally.
have those home office days, but also be out in nature, which is
Yeah,
one of the best things you can do.
I definitely don't have a day-to-day schedule. I don't have a routine per se. Um, I kind of thrive in that situation, so that works for me. I know it doesn't work for everybody. Um, but I would say that my work is very project-based. So I'm often working on one project at a time or a couple, but they overlap. So when I'm in Brazil, I'm 90% working on that Brazil project and maybe just answering emails for another project or two. Um, and then working on different projects. And POW is great because it'll do basically campaigns. So we've had an old growth campaign going on all summer, and it was all focused on outdoor recreationists and the value of old growth to outdoor recreation. And so that was my main focus. And so depending on the project, it can be very different. So sometimes as a research coordinator, I'm sometimes just finding a researcher in the right field who can do the research. So finding a cryosphere specialist who's going to give us some data that we need on glacier decline or retreating. Or sometimes I'm doing the research myself, and that can mean anything from modeling climate on a computer on Excel and other softwares, or it can mean putting out surveys. So we're doing some research looking forward to the Olympic Games and athletes' perspectives on the changes that they're seeing. So that was me putting out a survey to a lot of athletes and doing a lot of interviews. So some more qualitative data on how they feel about the way the Olympics handles climate change. And so each project is definitely unique.
Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of that experience and different kinds of involvements. And just from reading about the work that you do, you're involved in a lot of different projects and research activities at the University of Waterloo and also with Protect Our Winters Canada. So how do you balance your time with all these things?
Yeah, that's one of the parts that I love about how my career is going, is having all these different parts, and they've all got a sort of thread that ties them all together. So anything I'm doing in one area is either directly helpful for the other things that I'm doing, or I'm learning things from a different perspective. So it's great to learn the NGO perspective, working with protect our winters, and then understand the research perspective working with the University of Waterloo. And then we've got lots of different partners with Protect Our Winters, from brands to athletes to resorts. So seeing all these other people and what their perspectives are, and how to create change that works for everybody. So it's great having my hands in kind of a lot of different buckets at once. Never gets boring. Growing up ski racing, I didn't really go to regular high school. Did a lot of it while I was on the road racing. Same with university. When I was doing university and skiing at the same time, I was all over the place. There were some winter semesters where I spent 80% of the time in Europe while taking classes, not even really online, because we didn't do a lot of online, but like during high school, we would just correspondence or like send packages of work back and forth. So I've always been a person that is good at my own time management and getting things done when I need to get them done. But I definitely do not function on a 9-to-5 schedule. That's not for me, and I don't think it ever will be. So it's perfect for me. And I think you're totally right. I think this sort of field attracts people who are flexible and not concerned with schedules. I know some people thrive off schedules, and that's great. And it's just not who I am. It's great now that a lot of people are working from home, but I've been working from home for a number of years. So it's great that people are now understanding that. So I used to have a pretty big challenge with me working from home, and a lot of people thinking I wasn't working, or thinking that I wasn't getting things done just because I wasn't doing them between that 9-to-5. So if it's a powder day on a Wednesday, I might go skiing, but I've probably been working all Sunday when it was raining or something like that.
And as the research coordinator for POW, as you mentioned, it has given you that opportunity to work directly with resorts or brands to sort of translate that climate science data in accessible ways. What communication style have you found works the best with people involved in the ski industry to get them to act?
We use social media a ton. It's a quick and easy way to get current data out to people. And our team with POW is really good at turning the information to really visual formats, whether that's in videos or in graphics, and things that really are eye-popping and also interesting. And regardless of what medium we use, we also like to keep the message super positive. And I think that's really been effective in engaging people and getting them focused on solutions and seeing how they can make a difference.
And can you tell me more about that project that you worked on in Brazil? It was a Kayapo project, is that correct?
Yeah, so the Kayapo are an incredible Indigenous group that have a territory of 11 million hectares in the Amazon. And they've been super successful at defending their territory from illegal loggers and miners. And it's one of the largest ecologically intact areas in the Amazon. So it's super important for biodiversity, climate change, and also really important for maintaining their traditional cultures and livelihoods. So the NGO that I work alongside is helping them protect their land, providing support in everything from legal support to policy work to helping them with security and border patrols. And at the same time, have been helping them develop sustainable development initiatives. So small industries that incentivize conservation. So things like harvesting kumaru seeds and Brazil nuts that they sell as fair trade products, to a research station for biological research and field courses. And then, so I was working on that sort of more broadly, and have now been focusing specifically on the sustainable development related to small-scale ecotourism.
We'll be right back. This interview series is part of the Green Collar Careers program, brought to you by Relay Education, Relay is a Canadian charity that delivers renewable energy, environmental education, and green careers programs for youth. Remember to check out our website, relayeducation.com, and social media channels at Relay Education to find out when our next interview will be posted and to find resources on how to start your green career. So what steps can someone interested in ecotourism take in relation to that project?
Well, there's always opportunities to come down here, either as a student or as a guest. And I think that's one of the major benefits of sustainable tourism is getting to see some of these things firsthand. I really believe that it's hard to want to protect things that you haven't experienced. So I think the more people that are experiencing the Amazon and experiencing any sorts of places of wilderness and nature are going to be way more inclined to take action. So I think a lot of people that come down to the Amazon and come down and meet the kaipo and see some of these species just leave. It's a life-changing experience, and they leave, very enthusiastic and inspired to take action, whether that's donating to the kaipo or preserving land in their own backyard. I think it's really impactful.
Yeah, I agree. You definitely need that personal connection to really get that
Totally.
passion going. And
Yeah.
has it been a big impact on you personally, having been there to the Amazon?
Yes, absolutely. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and it's every time I come back from there. I just got back actually last week, and just leaves me so inspired to continue working and continuing to protect wild spaces and natural spaces that exist, as well as trying to create more of them and trying to create communities of people that have that same passion to protect these areas.
That's amazing. So what were you doing in your last trip?
We were restarting some of the tourism initiatives after a long hiatus with COVID, and doing some work to develop new activities. So right now it's currently focused mostly in catch and release fishing, but we're looking to expand to include some birding and some wildlife viewing and photography based ecotourism. Everything we do in the kaipo is really small scale, so I think that's not a huge concern yet. And that's actually one of the things we're constantly talking about and dealing with is growth good? You don't want too much, and that's where you start seeing negative impacts. And so tourism, wherever it is, always has that balance of you want to get as many people out and enjoying these spaces, but then at the same time, the more people you get out, the bigger the impacts are, whether it's trail damage or these Instagrammable locations or car traffic to get to these places. So it's always that balance of getting people out, but mitigating the impacts for sure.
Definitely. And on the topic of small scale or large scale events, the 2022 Winter Olympics are fast approaching in February.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that the Beijing 22 sustainability plan reflects a mission of being, and I quote, green, open, inclusive, and clean, unquote. Do you think the world's largest sporting competition can be sustainable for both the environment and people?
That's a tough question. I hope so. I'm a huge fan of the Olympics, and I love watching the world's best athletes compete. At the same time, I think there's a lot of things that are challenging. But then I think there's a lot of things that can be done to make them more sustainable. So I think the biggest challenges are you're getting huge amounts of people flying across the world, and that's something that we can't necessarily change if we want to do the Olympics. Some other things though, like building new infrastructure and having the Olympics in places that don't necessarily have natural snow or the right infrastructure for competitions. I think that's unnecessary. We've got lots of places in the world where there's already ski hills existing, and we don't need to cut new ones, or we don't need to build, full buildings that go to waste after the end of the Olympics. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done to make the Olympics a much more sustainable event. On the flip side, the same thing with all tourism is there's that element of travel, and we haven't yet figured out a way for people to travel across the world without burning fossil fuels. So there's definitely some conflict there.
Yeah, there are always trade-offs. And
Mhm.
and you being a former alpine ski racer, and you've won 2 NCAA championships and represented Canada at the World Junior Championships, how did you transition from being a professional athlete to the work that you do today?
Yeah, it was quite a smooth transition for me. I was quite lucky. So I went to the University of Denver to ski race, and so that was a really great 4 years where I was competing at a high level internationally throughout my whole time there, but at the same time was taking my undergrad and doing school and preparing myself for post athletic life. And so it was quite a smooth transition. I finished my 4 years at Denver and got a degree and was lined up to start my master's in Oxford the next year, and then raced just casually at an amateur level for one more year, and then was finished my career as an athlete, and was lucky enough to kind of stay with one foot in that world through the POW work and through the research in this area. So I still get to connect with a lot of my friends who are still racing or coaching, and know what's going on, with stay up to date, so that I'm my research also stays up to date. So it's a great mix, and it definitely wouldn't be where I am without skiing.
For young athletes, do you have any advice for what to keep in mind when thinking about combining that passion, and then when pursuing a career or choosing what to do after high school?
Passions are really important, and letting them guide you. I think whatever you're enthusiastic about is where you're going to be successful, because you're just naturally going to put more time and effort into it. I think sports really sets you up to be successful at pretty much anything you want to do. You're got a lot of drive and discipline, and that can be harnessed in any direction you want to take it. So I think yeah, I think there's just so many opportunities out there. And then on the flip side, for getting involved in sustainability and climate change, I think there's any passion or interest you have can have a greener, sustainable element to it. We need people with all sorts of skills and interests to be taking on these big challenges. So I think, yeah, there's opportunities for anybody to get involved.
Being involved in sport teaches you a lot of grit, determination, and important skills that you will need in whatever career you pursue later on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what are some interconnections between sports and sustainability?
I was lucky to compete in an outdoor sport, so we spent a lot of time just outside in nature, and especially with skiing, we're traveling to glaciers every year, so we were seeing these changes happen right in front of our eyes. So I think it gives you quite a strong awareness. I think there's a lot of people that it's easier for them to turn a blind eye to seeing these climate changes, or we'll get a big snowfall and it's easy to get excited about that and kind of push any fears and concerns one might have about climate change to the side. But I also think that sports, outdoor recreation, it all is this really positive way of bringing people together and reminding people of our shared interests and our shared value, whether it's a community that, there's lots of people whose jobs are dependent on the local resort, or a sport that, everyone enjoys doing together, and want to continue to doing together or pass on to their children. So I think it's a really great opportunity to be able to talk about climate change and environmental issues, and just focus on what we love and what we love about the places that we're in, or the places that we're traveling to, or the sports that we're doing, and using that as something to center the solutions on, and keeping it positive, and keeping it fun, and focusing on what we want to continue, not the things that we might have to cut out, or the things that we might have to stop doing. It's not, oh, stop eating meat or stop driving your car. It's like, let's keep skiing, and how can we keep skiing or keep playing soccer in reasonable temperatures or whatever it is.
And we've talked about ecotourism a bit more broadly, but I want to use the ski industry as a case study.
Absolutely.
In one of your literature reviews from the paper, Can the North American Ski Industry Attain Climate Resiliency? You wrote that the tourism sector is not currently well prepared for the challenges of climate change. Can you tell us more about that and why that is?
Yeah. So I often like to think of tourism as sort of a microeconomy or a micro community, because it really is dependent on every sector. It's dependent on transportation, it's dependent on food, it's dependent on everything. And it's dependent on people traveling across the world. So it's cross-cultural, and so every aspect of it is vulnerable. It's hard to sort of pin down how it's going to be impacted. If you're in the dairy business, it's easy to kind of look at all the factors that climate change is going to be impacting and see what the impact's going to be. But with tourism, it's so multidisciplinary that it's kind of like a small country or a small city dealing with climate change. You might have floods happening, but you also might have drought, and you might have a disruption in, say, the other side of the world where your tourists are coming from, and how does that, so it's all these factors that are playing into how tourism is going to be impacted. And so it's a really complicated and complex thing to try and predict or plan for. And so because of that, I think it often shuts down people who are involved in tourism, where they just start thinking short term and survival. A ski industry has a low snow year. It's hard for them to plan 50 years in advance. They're just trying to deal with that low snow year. Or a beach town has floods, and it's the same thing. They're dealing with the consequences, and it's hard to plan so far in advance with so many factors playing into it.
Yeah, it seems like that's their biggest challenge, like figuring out where to start when there's so many operational and logistical issues to deal with. Especially this past year with not only dealing, with lower snowfall, but also COVID. Like I can see why it's easy to fall into that short-term thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
And speaking of changes happening in the ski industry, what changes have you seen happening in ecotourism in regard to business practices and jobs?
I think that definitely there's increasing demand for sustainable products across the board. And I think that's only going to increase. We've got so much information, so people want to know that everything that they're buying or participating in is sustainable and socially just. And I think that's a really positive thing that's coming out of the recent times. And so I think increasingly we have research showing that increasingly tourists themselves are pushing for sustainable destinations. They're choosing them when they have the options. And so I think that's pushing the tourism operatives themselves to move in that direction. Groups like Protect Our Winters, they've got a big following, and we've got resorts joining who want to take on sustainable initiatives, and they're looking for help to do so. And so that's been really positive to see. And with that, it's the same with there's just more opportunities for eco-focused jobs in the sector. And I think it's across the board. We see, especially when we're working with these resorts, we see people who are, in their accounting department or in their communications department who are leading their sustainability movements. And it's really great to see people with all sorts of backgrounds and skills wanting to get involved and wanting to bring sustainability to parts. Like, you don't have to just be focused on sustainability to be helping tourism operations become more sustainable, or to be having a sustainable job.
What was something that really surprised you about ecotourism that you hadn't thought about in Brazil?
Yeah, well, so the one thing that's really great about the Kaipo project is, first of all, it's kind of backwards. With the skiing, taking an industry that exists and trying to flip it around and make it sustainable. And this one, it's being driven by the Kaipo themselves, who have this society that is extremely sustainable, and they've got this perspective of the world and their ecosystem that's very different from our worldview. So learning from them and seeing how they choose to develop tourism, which is there just to achieve their goals of conservation, is really exciting, and it shows that there's opportunities to live our lives and whether it's tourism or not, live in a sustainable way and have that be the goal, as opposed to, say, profits or growth or these other things that we're trying to kind of fit sustainability into in our world. So it's definitely a fresh perspective, and it's always interesting.
Well, what are the parallels between small tourism in Brazil and the ski industry in Canada?
Yes. So we work in Brazil with, right now we're working with fly fishers, but our goal is to work with birding tourists and photography tourists. And so the key thing that I note that is similar between the ski industry and right now the fly fishers, but I've also spoken with birders and photographers, is the passion. The fly fishermen are so passionate about what they do, just like all the skiers I know. You know, they want to talk about their gear, they want to talk about the places they've been, they want to talk about all of these components of their sport or activity, or and I think that's exactly what's needed to kind of instill this sustainability element into tourism and into people's lives, and they come away from these experiences, you know, they're involved in conservation in their rivers around their homes. They want to donate to protect the Kaipo rivers that they've traveled to. And I think it's the same with skiing. You know, we see the members of Protect Our Winters who are passionate skiers, and they want to protect the mountains and the snowpack and everything that's related to what they love to do. So I think that's what I think can be drawn on in any of the activities, whether it's birding, photography, or canoeing, or camping. Like, just getting people out and getting people passionate about things kind of lights a fire under people to join these movements and contribute.
Now with traveling opening up more, hopefully, what is the most important message for athletes and travelers to keep in mind when considering how to do it sustainably?
There's a lot of opportunities to make decisions that are more sustainable. So if you've got the opportunity to take a train somewhere across Europe instead of taking a couple short haul flights, that's huge. Or supporting businesses that are local when you're in destinations. So buying food locally, supporting small local stores for things that you might need. All this can make a difference and help bring the value of tourism or sustainable tourism. So supporting the small economies, that's what the benefit of tourism is. And so making sure that we're doing that, supporting the local stores, local businesses. If you got an opportunity to put your dollars behind a sustainable hotel or a green activity, then I really recommend doing that. And beyond just the impact of you, I think that'll help push the whole industry towards sustainability and incentivize other operations to make their practices green as well, so that people like you will choose them.
I agree. I think at the end of the day, at the heart of it is connecting with other cultures, with other places, and gaining that experience to apply into your own life and do it in a way that's sustainable. I think that's the key thing every person going for traveling should consider, at least.
Totally. I think, like, why do we travel and why do we want to go to places? It's to connect and experience things. So I think it's a huge huge opportunity for sustainability, and I think it leaves people super inspired to bring lessons learned or bring these experiences back to their daily life.
So how can people connect with you and find out more about the work that you do?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to reach me is through Instagram.
Okay.
I'm at Natalie Knowles, or I have a website, www.natlbknowles.com, or directly through POW. We've got tons of resources on our website. Lots of news that's coming up. We love for people to become members and get involved in some of our campaigns that we're doing that might be in your area, or get involved in our local chapters. We've got chapters in cities and towns across Canada who are doing projects on the ground related to outdoor recreation, climate change, sustainability, and always looking for people to either participate or volunteer or lead a new chapter if you're interested. So there's lots of opportunities, and always keen to talk to anybody who's interested in any of the above.
Well, Nat, thanks so much for joining us today in the Green Chair. It was great listening to your career story and all your interests, and we look forward to seeing all the great things that you will do next. Thanks again.
Thanks so much. It's great being here.
Thanks for sitting down with us in the Green Chair today. Once again, I'm your host, Anna Garza, and stay tuned for our next episode to learn more about the different paths people take to working in the green economy.